at the same time, there's an interesting cultural moment that's worth examining where I think because of the images of these emaciated babies who are dying from this blockade, I think there's been some realization of how this is all going to look in the history books. And so there's some CYA going on of everybody from Richie Torres, Bari Weiss, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, who's been completely silent, suddenly feeling like we need to say something. Like, we need to put something out. And many of these statements are pathetic, milquetoast, buy into a bunch of the, Israeli Hasbara propaganda. But something has happened that made all of these people at once feel like, okay, we need to express some sort of sympathy for these babies that our country, along with Israel, literally starving to death. So here's Richie Torres, who is a particularly interesting case. Richie, of course, has taken some roughly $1.5 million from AIPAC and the Israel lobby. He is one of, if not Israel's staunchest defender in Congress, seems to focus much more on Israel, a foreign country, than his own district in the Bronx, which is the poorest congressional district in the entire country. Even he felt the need to separate himself in this interview with Chuck Todd a little bit from the Netanyahu government. Let's go ahead and take a listen to a little bit of that.
But there's this feeling that it's become harder to criticize Netanyahu without somebody accusing that person of being anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Right? And this, and there's angst in this in the Jewish community. There's angst outside it. I'm guessing you probably hear it yourself in your own district.
Look, I love America, but I do not love my government. And it is possible to support Israel as a country while objecting to the Israeli government.
And the idea that there should be a Jewish state and not necessarily being in favor of what Bibi's doing.
Every country, including Israel, is fair game for criticism. If you're a Democrat, and if you're a Democrat of color, and if you're a black Democrat, you take immense pride in Barack Obama. I mean, he represents just one of the greatest achievements in politics. We take pride in his presidency. And to see a foreign leader visibly disrespect him in the manner that Bibi Netanyahu did, I feel did irreparable damage to the relationship with the Democratic Party. I think there's a legitimate perception that the present Israeli government is just aligned with the Republican Party.
Now, Richie Saagar, I think, is a particularly special example because Zoran Mamdani won his district, congressional district, quite overwhelmingly. And so he has seen a little bit of the political writing on the wall. I do think that this is largely the Zoran effect, where he's realizing that he is wildly out of step with the Democratic Party base, including his own base, in his district. And he has come out swinging now in defense of Zoran and against the Islamophobic attacks against him. He has, put out other comments about the starvation, and then he goes here and says this, which is very counter to, the way he's voted in Congress, where he's always there to vote for these definitions that conflate anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So for him to come out now and say, of course you can criticize the government of Israel. Oh, really? That's not the way that you've positioned yourself up to this point. But I think with him in particular, I don't think it's the starvation images so much as him reading the political writing on the wall and fearing a primary challenge. In particular, Michael Blake, who endorsed Zoran in that primary, lives in that district and is being encouraged and contemplating running in a primary against him. And I think he would be vulnerable. So he is desperately trying to reposition himself.
Yeah, it's interesting there on Richie. He's trying to whitewash a little bit. Really what I think where we're kind of seeing, though, is like the starvation was the jump-off point for a lot of centrists to do this. But it kind of reminds me of the liberal Zionist movement broadly about like, oh, Tel Aviv, it's the most beautiful place. It has gay pride parades. It's actually a pluralistic, incredible and free society. And like that is the Israel, that they kind of want to defend. But obviously over the last 18 months, like there's been a big, I would say, revealing of what the country, really is all about. And this is now the way that they can criticize Israel, or they can acknowledge facts about what's going on without undermining the aims of the war itself and or the state and the diplomatic cover. So, for example, here we have former AIPAC employee Wolf Blitzer, who is now openly acknowledging some of the reality here, where, if you'll recall, even he, in the very early days of the war, we had multiple clips here, was openly defensive, of the IDF. So let's take a listen.
Dozens and dozens of humanitarian groups are warning that doctors, journalists, aid workers are going hungry alongside what's going on in Gaza right now. UNICEF says that 80%, this is UNICEF, 80% of those who have died of starvation are children in Gaza. And now the enclave is on the brink of running out of specialized food that's needed to save these kids. In order for people to survive in Gaza, you need at least about 1,500 trucks coming in every day with supplies.
Are you holding a 3-month-old baby who is starving to death accountable for things that baby did not do?
No, I'm holding Hamas accountable.
It's so important to remember that we are not talking about talking points. We are talking about human beings. And there are people who are starving, children who are starving in Gaza today who had absolutely nothing to do with what happened on October 7th. We are in the wealthiest country of the world. Israel is our ally and our partner. We have leverage here. The question is, why aren't we using it?
Like other news organisations around the world, is prevented by Israel from reporting inside Gaza and from seeing for ourselves what is really going on. So we rely on trusted freelancers in the territory.
Mohammed and his mother, Hidayah, were filmed by one of the trusted Palestinian freelancers we work with in Gaza, who are themselves starving. Israel does not allow international journalists to enter the territory.
So you can see, even CNN has begun to turn. Let's put B3 up here on the screen. This is, in my opinion, some of the most important, Krystal. This is from the Free Press, which is ironically named, but you can see that not even that long ago, in May, they had a story called, the quote, "The Gaza Famine Myth, How Lazy Journalism, Bad Data, and Skewed Statistics Fueled Accusations of War Crimes Against Israel." And then not even, 2 months or so later, they had that guy, Amit Segal, who is himself a right-wing Israeli journalist, actually write a story, say, quote, "The price of flour shows the hunger crisis in Gaza. There have been tremendous lies about Israel's war. That doesn't mean the threat of starvation isn't real. It is." And in fact, Amit really is, I think, trying to get ahead of the entire situation. He was even quoting people who were Israeli, Israeli scholars who were warning about the flour and the hunger crisis in Gaza. This is another one. This will take some explaining. This is a guy named Yair Rosenberg, who really, in my opinion, embodies the liberal Zionist movement. But broadly, he's like the anti-Semitism hatchet man. He's the person who works for The Atlantic, who's constantly concerned trolling around anti-Semitism. And here he writes, quote, "My latest, how Trump opened the door to ethnic cleansing in Gaza. He needs to close it and stop feeding the Israeli right's fantasy of conquest, or he will never achieve the peace he claims to want. Please read the whole thing." Quote, "Trump turned a far-right fantasy, ethnic cleansing in Gaza, into U.S. policy. He needs to reject it." I mean, look, it doesn't take a genius to say also this is not just a Trump policy. This has been a Biden policy now as well. All of it has been underwritten by America. If anything, the Trump administration is just more open about allowing it to happen. But it's like Ben-Gvir and Bibi have been saying this since October of 2023, people, in terms of what, the actual goal of the entire war is. So you can see that people in the U.S. are trying to shift. But again, I think that the starvation is actually the axis point, so that when Israel buckles, which they did, at least for now, they can say, see, they listened to us, without undermining any of the broader policy implications of the war, or, and more importantly, upsetting future funding to the state of Israel, which they'll continue to call you anti-Semitic or whatever.
Of course.
Of course. So nothing is really changing, in my opinion. This is all like a big cover operation, like a limited hangout, I guess is the way that you say it.
I think that's right. And with regards to the Free Press, I hate even calling them that, but Bari Weiss's publication, their line is like, oh, well, it's so hard for Israelis or Israel supporters to take these legitimate reports of starvation seriously because they've been crying wolf all along about how everybody was starving to death, and this was just a pack of lies. That is all just complete and total bullshit. I mean, again, you had days after October 7th, you had Yoav Gallant announcing a complete siege and we're going to treat them like human animals. And while there have been, times when war aid has been coming in, yes, there have been dire circumstances in the past. And even though the majority of starvation deaths have come now, there were starvation deaths, by the way, before. But they act like if the whole population is not dying today, then it's not really a big deal if you have people, a large proportion of the population, going without food for days and days at a time. So the risk has been very real. It takes a long time. It takes months and months of concerted effort to get we're talking about 100% of the population in famine conditions, in like the worst stage of famine conditions right now. And that is something that we don't see even in, some of the worst, most war-torn places in other parts of the planet. In Gaza, it is the worst. So yes, all those warnings, all of that concern, all of the way along, that has been completely and totally justified and is vindicated, but horrifyingly vindicated by the fact that we now have so many people now, over a dozen people died just yesterday, just in the last 24 hours from starvation. It actually takes you a long time to get to the point where you literally die from lack of food to eat. You got a bunch of politicians mostly these are on the Democratic side, that have decided, okay, we better say something. At this point, could put this up on the screen. Barack Obama, that guy's still around. He had this to say. He says, well, lasting resolution of the crisis in Gaza must involve a return of all hostages, cessation of Israel's military operations. These articles underscore the immediate need for action to be taken to prevent the travesty of innocent people dying of preventable starvation. So there you go, very milquetoast, not a lot of blame attributed there. And he shared some New York Times pieces that contained a bunch of Israeli hasbara. Let's go ahead to the next one. I believe we've got Cory Booker here. I mean, this guy is typical like Bill Ackman length, posts on Twitter. But I'll just save you the trouble and tell you that nowhere in this long screed does he mention the country. The word Israel is not in here at all. And Cory Booker is big AIPAC recipient and always carrying the line for them, but he felt the need at least to say something about what he describes accurately as the catastrophic hunger and suffering of civilians, especially children, women, the sick, and elderly in Gaza. Let's go ahead and put the next one up on the screen. Hillary Clinton, she actually beat Barack Obama to the punch. She says 8 organizations report thousands of children in Gaza are at risk of starvation, while trucks full of food sit waiting across the border. Full flow of humanitarian assistance must be restored immediately. Again, Israel is not mentioned. I actually wonder if Obama didn't see her post and be like, shit, Hillary got in before me? I better say something. Put the next one up on the screen. We've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says, I can unequivocally say what happened to innocent people in Israel on October 7th was horrific, just as I can unequivocally say that what has been happening to innocent people and children in Gaza is horrific. The war and humanitarian crisis must end. I mean, I sort of hate calling it a humanitarian crisis because it makes it sound like this just happened, right? Like this wasn't an intentional Israeli and U.S. policy to starve these people to death. But that, in fact, is exactly what is going on there. And then finally, we've got Amy Klobuchar, who was just recently pictured in that lovely photo op with wanted war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu when he was here in Washington. Now she gave a little heartfelt, voice-quavering presentation on the floor of the Senate about how acute malnutrition is rising. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed in recent weeks while seeking food, most in the vicinity of Gaza Humanitarian Foundation distribution sites and others on the routes of aid convoys. This is simply unacceptable. I think she may have been one of the ones that signed on to, Chris Van Hollen is leading a new letter calling on us to abandon, stop using the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, allow the UN to go about distributing aid. I think she may have been one of the people who signed on to that. But again, total change, total repositioning from her as she now pretends to care about Palestinian life.
They're all like that. I mean, if you look at Cory Booker, he was pictured with Yoav Gallant not that long ago.
He was also in that Netanyahu photo. Right. He was trying to hide behind someone else, but he was there, yeah.
I'll give MTG a pass. I mean, she actually tried to cut all funding to Israel, which apparently AOC is not even, willing to sign on to. But, within the Republican framework, that's about as good as you're going to get from any politician. The truth is that, this, and that's what I was warning about before. This is basically like a way for these centrist pro-Israel folks to say, look, we pressured them and they're good people, they're allowing the aid in without undermining any of the war goals, aims itself. So to the extent that there's been any diplomatic pressure, that's where it is. But you should also take it as proof that when you want to, you can force them to do anything. Yeah. I mean, it only took a day for them to buckle on the starvation and to actually allow some. Now, I'm not claiming that's going to fix anything, but obviously it's better better than nothing, and it's, changing things in the future. And so where things are right now is, I think, again, that they're trying to set the ground so that the quote legitimate war aims, don't get changed at all. And that's just going to continue marching forward. I guess there's a big question of whether the Democratic, apparatus itself will put up with it. I think they will. I just don't think there's any real evidence, outside of this right now, that they're not going to forcefully push back. On the Republican side too, I mean, the dollars are just going to keep flowing. There's at least going to be another vote sometime in the next 6 months to 1 year to continue more aid, to Israel. I guarantee you it's going to pass. But I mean, it's just more of a question about the political system where, look, if you look at the right and left wing polling on this, outside of boomer evangelical Americans, the entire country is against funding Israel now at this point. The entire country, like probably super majorities, effectively, especially, by the way, if they really knew what was going on, and if Fox, and that's probably what the first honest segment you've seen on CNN on Israel in like 2 years. Now imagine if that was on Fox News or anywhere else. I genuinely believe everything would change if that were to happen, but that's the power of the propaganda machine. It really is. And so that's where the political ground is kind of being, pointed towards, and everything is kind of being used to just pressure them on this one point without undermining the rest of the entire project.
Yeah, I think that the other fear is that Hillary, Obama, Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, Wolf Blitzer, Bari Weiss, all these people, that they are not stupid people. They, like us, see exactly where this is going. We have reached this point of famine where some of the death and destruction is irreversible. And the plan to completely, ethnically cleanse the population, like it's been laid out in clear terms and is being implemented as we speak. And so they can see the dark direction that this is going in. And so this is this is so that 2 years from now, they can, oh, look, I made a statement. Look, I spoke out about this. Don't let them get away with rewriting history. Like so many of these, I mean, everybody that we just mentioned, they all enabled it, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, who votes for the military aid for Israel routinely. Like they all enabled this, and they should never be forgiven for it. Their little ass-covering, milquetoast bullshit statements are not anywhere close to enough to make up for what has been done here. And so I think they see the way that history will record this. I think they see that this is going to get, if it's possible, even darker and more disgusting, abhorrent, outrageous, like barbaric than it was before. And so they want to put their little, oh, look, I sent out a tweet, so that they can pretend like they're still liberal do-gooders, even though it's all complete and total bullshit.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.